Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me and spending your last session of the day with me. My name is Stephen Phillips. I am a solution architect on the architecture team of Epic Games. So I help a lot of customers, non-game customers, integrate all sorts of Epic technologies into their workflow. And I figured that Fest would be a great opportunity to turn a lot of those conversations into one talk about our bundle of products. You should be aware, earlier this year in March, we announced that there was new pricing for Unreal Engine. If you're a game developer or a small studio under $1 million in revenue, then Unreal Engine remains free to use. And for everyone else, there's a per-seat license. And what's cool is that we surprise you all by saying, even if you're not paying for Unreal Engine or you are, you get RealityCapture and Twinmotion completely for free. So that means that everyone in this room, I'm assuming, is licensed for these two new products. And some of you might not have worked with them before or really know how they work. So I wanted to do this presentation on how they're better together. A couple years ago, you probably saw that we put Twinmotion into the Epic Games launcher right next to the Unreal Engine tab, but I bet a few of you didn't even notice that RealityCapture snuck in there as well. So when you go home, you already have these install files waiting on your machine to go and do what you want with them. Like any good presentation, I need to ask the audience a live question. So I am curious, it's maybe a silly question, but how many of you use Unreal Engine at least every once in a while? So that's, I think, everyone. OK, then how about Twinmotion? How many of you use that every once in a while? OK, that's closer to half. It's pretty good. And RealityCapture, how many of you use that like here and there? OK, so less than Twinmotion. So it's almost the same ratio I predicted here, but there's a pretty good mix. I think my goal would be at the end of the presentation, a few more of you will kind of raise your hands for more than just one or two products. So for the agenda today, I'll give a brief overview of those three products, Unreal Engine, Twinmotion, and RealityCapture. And I will say those names probably 100 times each. Then we'll get into interoperability and how they work together. And I'll end with a huge list of examples for how they could fit into your business depending on what you do. We'll start with Unreal Engine. I won't spend too much time on this because we're at Unreal Fest, and you guys hopefully were looking at the keynote with all that insane content from so many different industries. You know that it's the world's most open and advanced real-time 3D software. It's well established. There's so many different use cases from car configurators and architectural rendering, and of course games and television shows. There's a well-stocked marketplace and fab.com for assets from the community and other supplemental tools like MetaHuman Creator and Mesh to MetaHuman. What differentiates Unreal Engine from the other two products that I'm going to be going over, as well as from other products in the industry, is that the source code is completely available. So if you don't like your binary build that comes with the launcher, you can go to GitHub and get the latest commit from the main branch, although it's not best for everyone. But if you know C++, you can do anything you want. You can make custom plugins, completely change the renderer, turn it into a new product, so to speak. And even without using the source build, you can script out the whole editor with Python and blueprints and, of course, C++. With great power comes some complexity. So I know a lot of the non-game users are really drawn to Unreal Engine. It has a great reputation for being photoreal and artist-friendly. But some people get sucked into the complex PCG graphs and material graphs and blueprint graphs. And when you just want a pretty picture at the end, that might be a little too much. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm a huge Unreal Engine fanboy, but I'm just setting this up because this is in contrast to the next product we're going to talk about, which is Twinmotion. This is our easy real-time visualization tool, still running on Unreal Engine. So all of the different outputs are going to look really, really similar to Unreal Engine outputs. But it's a custom tool originally meant for architectural rendering, and it has a simple interface for constructing your scenes, bringing in models, assigning materials, specialized tools for foliage growth and a weather system, but extremely easy to work with, which is going to be that phrase I keep on going to again and again. You can see here some other asset placement tools, things that in Unreal Engine you would have to maybe actually build or buy a custom tool to do. So simple interface, easy to learn, a huge built-in asset library, as well as access to the Megascans library and Sketchfab library, all inside the same interface, and more specific tools for things like pedestrians and vehicles and such. This is an example of the pedestrian tool, so you can just do a couple clicks of a spline and populate a path with moving people. And you can change the density of that crowd of people, and even like what type of clothing they're wearing for your different scenes that you're creating. There's a bunch of different animated folks you can drag in really quickly, change their outfit, change their animation or their pose, which again, it would be a little more of a minutia headache inside of Unreal Engine. The time of day system is amazing. Just a simple slider is there to change the time of day. It's even geographically located to be, accurate shadows. And you can take the weather, again, with one slider from a clear, dry day to a drizzly, wet day, and even turn it into a snowstorm or something more miserable. You can even bring up an entire infinite ocean horizon just with a single checkbox, basically. There's 3 different rendering options with Twinmotion. It's still all Unreal Engine, but there's the standard legacy renderer that's been there since Unreal Engine 4. This year we introduced Lumen, which gives you a lot better reflections and global illumination, ambient occlusion. And then when you need that perfect pixel, the path tracer is extremely simple to just flip on like a switch. And you can get the perfect depth of field and the perfect translucent materials and the perfect reflections with whatever sample count that you want. Exporting stuff from Twinmotion is extremely simple compared to the movie render queue system of Unreal. You can, of course, do still renders up to 64K with the tiled rendering, animated videos, 360 panoramas, which can also be a stereo panorama for a lightweight VR experience. And besides static content, you can even export the entire executable so that you can hand it to somebody else and they can explore your 3D scene in real time. And for the panoramas and the presentation file, there's a really cool option called Twinmotion Cloud. This is the one exception for those licensees who are the game developers or the not paying per seat. That's only available for those users. But this is an example of the panorama set. So in Twinmotion, all you do is you define different camera locations in your 3D scene and render them out. And we will create the user interface for a Matterport style experience. We will stitch together the virtual tour for you, and we will even host it for you on our website. So you can take just a simple URL link and embed it in any website you want, and send this around to people as an easy way to deliver content without trying to learn other third-party tools or write this yourself. It's a really similar concept for that Twinmotion Cloud. This looks like it's just a set of images and videos, but actually this is the real-time Twinmotion scene running in the cloud, and we are hosting it for you, and you're not paying for the minute. So you can pause this animation, go into a construction phase, which is basically an animation tool inside of Twinmotion, interactively tweak things, and even go and change that time of day. And because it's a full real-time scene, you're not just stuck in that camera. You can actually fly around and explore. So it's an extremely flexible and easy way to deliver your media to external stakeholders or just share it with other people. So Twinmotion and Unreal, those are your options for rendering content. And RealityCapture is where you would probably start. This is our state-of-the-art photogrammetry tool. It is the fastest and the most accurate in the industry. Lets you combine any number of photographs and laser scans to create 3D objects or to create point clouds for any sort of purpose that you might be thinking of for your type of industry. And there's a lot of different tools inside there for working with that data, analyzing it, and cleaning it up. So this is a community example, a historical chapel building. It is created from tens of thousands of photographs and laser scans. And when you use the clipping box here, you can see the absolutely insane level of detail on the inside and the outside of this building. And there were a few sessions today from partners using this for even larger projects than this, and it's really fascinating. So for this type of project where you need perfect accuracy, it's just incredible. And besides the 3D content, you can also use it for these 2D orthographic images, use it for all sorts of different measurements and outputs. And yeah, besides like historical buildings and just recreating existing objects, you can use it for game assets and movie assets. Anything that you have in the real world that you would like to digitize, RealityCapture is where you'd go for that. I recently got to use this on a webinar that we did. So this is data from Vexcel Imaging Group. They're a provider of aerial imagery for GIS things. This is a 150 megapixel image from an airplane, extremely high resolution, and they gave me 1,400 of those. So I put that 100 gigabytes of data into RealityCapture, and I didn't set up any settings. I didn't set any control points or anything. I just told it to align the images. And the end result was a 5 by 7 kilometer square of downtown Las Vegas. So this is absolutely crazy quality. It's not even the high detail setting, but it's still 500 million triangles. And you can practically get down on the street and be exploring the city that way. So very, very powerful technology. And this was a fun project to learn that on. It works at any scale, though. You can scan a tiny little coin or a piece of fruit, a house, and a mountain range or an entire city. These are just examples from our Quixel asset library, the megascans. And every megascan, almost every megascan is coming through a RealityCapture pipeline. So if you've ever used those assets or you've ever seen one of our demos, then you've already been hands-on with the products from this tool. And this is your reminder that you could do it yourself. You don't need crazy equipment like one of our team members is using here. You could use anything from cell phone images to a hobby drone, up to aircraft and satellites and Mars rovers, which there's a demo of down in the expo. If you're interested in learning more about photogrammetry, there's a really cool learning path that I think people are not really aware of. But this is more than 80 modules, including hardware, lighting, processing, and exporting, just about everything there is to do inside, not just capturing reality, but the fundamental concepts of photogrammetry. I have to give an honorable mention to another product, which is RealityScan. So this is a mobile app available for Android and iOS. It uses the power of RealityCapture, but on your cell phone. So it has a really intuitive, guided, augmented reality interface. Again, you can test this down at the expo with some products, some actual physical props we brought. It's a great introduction to photogrammetry. It's really lightweight, and we process your models for you and host them on Sketchfab. So for the principles of photogrammetry, it's the same as RealityCapture, but the details of how the product works is different and won't really apply to some of the other examples later. Okay, so that's the overview of 3 products. We have our 2 content creation pieces for Unreal Engine and Twinmotion, and then for actually creating individual assets from scratch, you would have RealityCapture. But now we're going to talk about how they actually talk to one another. For RealityCapture to Unreal Engine, this is super standard. Like I said, all of our demos are made this way. So this is the medieval sample project you can download from the launcher, almost entirely these types of assets. And there's a great short tutorial from Jakub van Ko on YouTube about taking like this Outlook tower and bringing it into Unreal. And all it is selecting an Unreal Engine scene conversion when you export it, which is really easy. If you're targeting like a mobile platform or you're really optimization conscious, you can do simplification and baking inside of RealityCapture. But Nanite and virtual textures are great Unreal Engine features for photogrammetry. So you can have insanely high resolution meshes and textures, no problem. The other direction doesn't seem that intuitive, like Unreal Engine to RealityCapture, but I found one use case for you. This is a model that I scanned recently at Sandcastle, and I really like how it turned out. I think the model and the texture is really high res, but the UVs leave some room to be desired. The RealityCapture really, really prioritizes texel density and avoiding stretching, but sometimes it's to a fault. So what you can do is export that to Unreal Engine and use Unreal as a modeling tool. So I hope you're aware that there's a whole modeling mode in Unreal Engine with like dozens, maybe 100 different tools, one of which is a full-blown UV editor. So you can reproject UVs, move around the UV islands, you can cut and sew individual edges. There's so many tools in there that even I was discovering as I was playing around with this. This was the end result for me. It looks closer to what maybe a human would UV on a mostly flat object like that. In RealityCapture, you can import that FBX file with the proper UVs, and it'll come in the same spot. Then you can open up our texture projection tool. So this will let you target the high-res model and bake it down to whatever you imported. And it looks the same. It looks just as good. But when you open up the UVs, it obviously makes much better use of that precious texture space. So you can reduce the resolution of the texture and get the same results. And on the Twinmotion side, it is identical. So you're going to export that same FBX file. Back to that city project that I was working on, I exported this in multiple chunks at different resolutions because Twinmotion does not have nanite. So I had to be just a little conscious of the poly count. And here it is in Twinmotion, but the red building is actually a separate reality capture scan done with a drone, courtesy of Aero AI and Canada Design. But together they make a cohesive city where you have the insane scale of the 5 by 7 kilometers and a little extra. But down on the street, you still have the life, and you can, place your cameras and place your people and have it run in real time. Twinmotion to Unreal has been a big theme of mine this year, making sure that people are aware that that is an option. So this is a scene in Twinmotion. The structure, the room was imported from an external file, and then there's some asset library meshes scattered around. And this could be perfect just to do renderings within Twinmotion, but let's say hypothetically we want to do something that we can only do in Unreal Engine, like put it onto an LED wall and do some sort of film shoot with it, or use some other plugin or marketplace asset to interact with it. That's where we can go to the File menu and do a Datasmith export. And when you do this, you should almost always use that optimized export. When you point it at a Unreal Engine project directory, it will migrate over some material files to the project, but it will export a Datasmith file and an associated assets folder. Then in Unreal Engine, you go to the Datasmith import, and you target that file, and you get the same scene in Unreal. So it looks almost exactly the same, but you might wonder, like, why would you use both when you have the same scene? The really good use case is from the architecture industry, which I work a lot with. In an architecture firm, it might not be uncommon to have 20 or 30 different 3D designers who are working with 3D scenes or exporting 3D content day in and day out. And yet that same firm who loves our software only has 1 or 2 Unreal specialists. So because Twinmotion is easier to pick up and easier to onboard 40 different designers from different backgrounds, that lets them prepare environments and create things for the Unreal Engine pipeline that then gets upgraded for the Unreal specialist to work with, then do whatever they want with. So that would let you do more Unreal Engine projects with fewer Unreal Engine developers, since their time is not spent importing models and assigning materials and setting up basic props and things. There's a couple limitations. It's not a perfect one-to-one conversion at this point, so animated things don't come through. That includes the pedestrian paths and the vehicle paths. Also, the weather and ambience systems don't come over. For example, if you make a moody nighttime scene where it's raining and the ground is wet, when you import it to Unreal Engine, it will be daytime again. So some of the material parameters for like a wet ground are still there in Unreal, and you can reconfigure them, but that whole system doesn't come over, and the particle effects from like a rainy or snowy scene won't come over. So you should think about it more as like a environment prep tool. I get a lot of questions about the other direction. So you have Unreal Engine blueprints and super awesome custom Unreal materials, and you want to bring that for your Twinmotion designers to use. Unfortunately, the answer is no. We do not have a two-way bridge at this point, even though with every release, Twinmotion and Unreal Engine do get closer and closer together. I do have an asterisk here, because there's kind of an emergency lever you can pull if you really, really need something, and that would be another file export. So this is the Hillside sample project from Unreal Engine. Gorgeous scene, by the way, definitely worth checking out. And let's say I wanted to render it in Twinmotion for some reason, or to, use it to populate all those cool animated smart assets. There's a couple problems with the file export system, like if we have a few hundred instances of trees, those instances won't really be carried over in that file the same way. So I wouldn't recommend embedding every single tree into one FBX, for example. But when you go to the File menu, you can do an export of your selected objects, or you can export your entire scene. And in this case, I was just exporting what I wanted to render. And you get a few options for your file format. You get to pick from FBX, GLTF, GLB, OBJ and USD if you have that plugin enabled. For the Twinmotion workflow, I recommend the GLB format, only because it will embed the textures for you, so you don't have to set up other materials inside of Twinmotion. But the other file formats can also export the textures if you want to reassemble it. These are some of the settings. The GLB, by default, I think, is going to actually bake down your textures to your meshes. So like a whole material graph from Unreal is not going to come over into Twinmotion or into that sort of file format. So all of your UV scaling and fancy effects and macro variations is not going to translate as well. So this is the result in Twinmotion of that export. It's not as nice. You know, the textures and the fancy materials didn't come over, and I had to leave out the trees. But maybe somebody wanted this as a reference so that they could just put other objects into the same place for a different part of the workflow. Or perhaps you have an Unreal Engine scene that you just want as background assets for a Twinmotion render. There's a couple use cases I can think of, but this is really your only option for going backwards from Unreal to Twinmotion. So to recap on the pros and cons of both softwares, it usually comes down to complexity of the inputs and the interface versus the complexity of possible outputs. So Twinmotion is really easy to pick up and learn. You could probably do it in like an hour or two with a couple of tutorials. Simple to export media with, but you're locked into the Twinmotion box. Like you can't, there's no third-party asset library for Twinmotion specifically. You can't have your plugin running in Twinmotion. Whereas Unreal Engine, there's a steeper learning curve, there's a much bigger download size, but you can do anything you want. So I hope you better understand how these different products can work together, talk to each other a little bit, depending on your project use case. Next, I want to talk about industry use cases. It's going to be a little wordy, I apologize, but there's just so many different examples to cover too quickly. The gaming industry, Unreal Engine is an obvious choice, you know, the best game engine ever. And RealityCapture is definitely an industry standard for creating assets and using that in your game. Twinmotion is less of a clear use case. I don't know of any game studios using Twinmotion per se, so if you are, please come find me and talk to me so I can learn more. But I think it can still be a good tool for ideation, quickly prototyping environments, not quite level design, but maybe like a 3D concept art tool. Architecture, engineering, and construction, I'm a little closer to this. RealityCapture gets a lot of bonus points for this industry because it actually has a lot of specific tools just for that. So once you've processed your environment or your building, you can actually capture those top-down orthographic images, do the digital site model data, do all sorts of different measurements and contours, and use it for actual engineering and construction stuff. Twinmotion, of course, that was an ArcViz tool originally, so it's great for rendering, great for importing your BIM models. And then Unreal Engine is where you would kind of upgrade if you wanted something custom, like a custom UI or an iPad app that does augmented reality. And if you ever needed to reach outside of Unreal Engine and connect to live data for digital twins or connect to a GIS system for something, then that's where you would go. For fashion and consumer goods, you definitely could scan products with RealityCapture. You can also scan people, so you can use the mesh to metahuman process to turn like a real person into an animated and rigged metahuman for something like a fashion shoot or digi-double. Twinmotion is great for easy pack shots, so you can have basically a template project for all the different camera angles and lighting and environments, and then just quickly render out all of your standard product imaging. It also has a substance integration, and we can show you this down at the booth. So any substance material files, you can get access to all the parameters and quickly iterate on different material designs. Unreal Engine is where you would go for more creative endeavors, like you can do a full-blown cloth simulation in Unreal using Chaos Cloth. You can import things from Marvelous Designer, or you can import a pre-simulated piece of clothing or other meshes into Unreal. And if you want to do something like a virtual fashion shoot, we have a lot of mocap solutions, and of course you could get into virtual production if you want to make commercials for your products. For manufacturing and automotive, you're less likely to use RealityCapture for like a freshly machined metal part or shiny car paint surface. But I think you could scan a clay model sculpture and digitize that, so CAD designers could use it as a reference for the 3D models. Twinmotion is getting a lot of traction in the automotive industry, and we have a lot of plans for how to improve that. We just came out with a bunch of new car paint shaders and fabric shaders that work well. And the path tracer is not only the same amazing path tracer as Unreal Engine, but it's even easier to set up and use. Unreal Engine is, as you heard in the keynote, Unreal Engine is already being used by most of the top car companies, anywhere from design review to the final car configurator, pixel streamed on a public-facing website tied to a real inventory system and a real customer billing system. So you can go crazy in that regard, and you can also go crazy on the pipeline management. So in Twinmotion, you import your model and you get a few options for how to merge it or to leave it unmerged. Whereas in Unreal Engine, you can define every detail of that through interchange or data prep. So treating different meshes and pieces differently and applying custom logic to every single model. For simulation and training, RealityCapture, again, just capturing those big, large areas is great for that. With the added benefit that RealityCapture can export a 3D tiles format. That is the CCM format. If you've seen any of the demos with like Google Earth data streaming into Unreal Engine, that means that you can have your photogrammetry content streamed in and geolocated to line up with all of that data in a standard way, which is pretty powerful for this type of industry. Unreal Engine is definitely well established, doing training simulators like flight sims or combat sims, and gives you plenty of opportunities to integrate custom hardware, custom displays. Twinmotion, we see less of it here, but I think it can still be a good tool, again, for that team of designers to do scenario creation and prepare UE environments for Unreal Engine. It's already got this massive library of architectural and city street assets and even rubble and things like that. Media and entertainment is the last one, I promise, of the industries. Of course, you can create digidoubles of props as well as your actors. And there's also examples of volumetric performance capture. So that's basically a photogrammetry solve of a person once per frame, which is really cool. Twinmotion is getting a lot of traction for set design. So quickly mocking up your 3D scenes for a production shoot, importing your Rhino and SketchUp models and getting proof of those before you actually implement anything in the real world. There's even an LED wall tool inside of Twinmotion to do some basic tech viz and make sure you can position cameras and lights and walls where you want. Unreal Engine is definitely established in media and entertainment. We already know that more than 800 film and TV shows are being created with our very robust animation tools there. So I wanted to end this talk with a personal project. I wanted to put my money where my mouth was and use all three products in one project. And it was a good excuse to have some creative fun as well. So I started in Twinmotion just as a concepting tool. Where I live in San Diego, there's a lot of construction going on right now. So sometimes I just look out the window and think about like a construction video game. And I figured I could create something in Twinmotion since there are so many construction assets already there. So I made this really basic plot of land and spread out some trees and started dumping all these construction assets in. And so I was imagining you could manage your resources for the construction game and make sure that the different stages were on time to finish a building. But it was about at this point that I realized this is maybe a lot of complexity for like a proof of concept presentation. And I had a stretch goal of putting this into UEFN. And that has a more strict limit on how many assets you can have. So I started thinking about if this maybe could just be a smaller scale example that would be stylistically easier to manage for this project. The Twinmotion library also has direct access to the Quixel Megascans. And I started bringing over some tools, like a hammer and an anvil. And I figured that maybe you could be like creating your own resources, like you have to forge your own steel and you have to cut your own wood and that would be a fun way to think about a construction site. And this is all a true story. I was literally just playing around and decided to record it. So then I was thinking, okay, it's kind of like a backyard experience, like you're building a skyscraper in your backyard. But that's about as far as I went with this backyard concept. I was also thinking that it would be even simpler to create assets from a different local location because I live near the ocean, and maybe this could be like more of a sand castle type experience. So I bought some toy construction trucks at the thrift store, which I guess is part of my job description now. And this is 250 images, which I put into RealityCapture, and this is the result. It's really not bad for what I needed it to do. I used Unreal Engine again as my modeling tool. So I re-UV'd things, I filled holes, I rebaked the textures, I separated the different movable components, so the bucket of the truck and the wheels of the truck, I dislodged and made them separate assets. And this way, they could be animated and rigged like this. I scanned several other assets, like a little bulldozer. This is the sandcastle, and fun fact, 1 minute after I finished capturing a few hundred images of my sandcastle, it was washed away by the ocean, which was pretty dramatic. I also took out a drone and scanned a local park. So it's just kind of an empty hillside, but I figured this would serve as like an undeveloped piece of land that you needed to clear as part of the game. So I didn't get as far as real gameplay, but I hope from this animation you kind of see where I was going with it. Every asset here is a RealityCapture object from my local environment, and all the little trucks could be delivering materials to you, and you have to clear this land. But there's an impending tide that's coming in and threatening to wash away your structure, so you have to make sure it's robust enough to withstand that. Based on the progress so far, I don't think whatever I'm building here is gonna really survive and make the cut, but it was fun to destroy it anyways, virtually. Yeah, it's game over, unfortunately. So I have one more bonus product for you because that's just what we do here. We have a lot of products in the Epic ecosystem. But because I made this animation inside of Unreal Engine, that means it wasn't too hard to migrate it over to UEFN. So now my custom RealityCapture game is suddenly available inside of Fortnite. And it can be published to hundreds of millions of players onto every platform, which is really mind-blowing, and it's also just what we do here at Epic. So being able to use this bundle to create this sort of example and show that, that we're empowering you to do something like that, I think was pretty fun, and I hope by the end of this, you kind of have some new ideas for how you might use this in your own projects. So thank you so much.